Hello and welcome to our last session. I know it's a bit of a different format and I apologize for it having to be this way. I have prepared a short video with some of the information that I would have shared with you in the lecture, but I will also use it as an opportunity to discuss some of the main ideas in the texts that you had assigned, and also some of the things that come up in the video that I also assigned. This is an interactive video. It's the first time that I do it. So within the video, there will be moments where there will be some questions or some opportunities for you to interact with it. So let's give it a try. Let's see how it works. Today we're talking about the riddle of the disappearance. How is it that in some areas, particularly Argentina, Mexico, and Peru, Black populations are no longer considered to be a large part of them? They're in fact now only something that appears in very small pockets and very faraway places. In the forum that I've attached to this week in Moodle, I have asked 3 questions for you to answer, and I would like for you to engage with them. You can engage with them through a written response. You can do it by posting a short video with your response and your ideas on it. That would be also good. Now here I have put up on my screen the Moodle page for this week, and so here you have the forum, so the place where I want you to engage with those issues, and I also have the different readings. So first let's move on to Andrews's reading. I think that's the first one that I would like to discuss, and I have it here also on my screen. His first chapter that we look at is called The Riddle of the Disappearance, and he puts in very carefully explains the reasons why it is believed that the Afro populations disappeared. So the first phrase is "No hay negros en Buenos Aires," and that's a very typical thing that Argentines will say, that there are no Black people in Argentina. The question is why, and how did that happen? Because we do know that at time of independence, at least 30% of the population of Argentina was Black. So something happened in between. Of course, 30% of a small population is still going to be a small population, but still in proportion, they are going to be important. So we look at the issue, and mainly we're going to be thinking about how they were wiped up in war. So one of the things that we have been discussing in the previous 2 weeks is the importance of war experience for slaves and how this gave them a possibility of ending with slavery. But this also led to the disappearance of Blacks for 2 reasons. On one side, because many of them died and passed away during this period, but also because they were incorporated in the new societies and progressively whitened and stopped being as Black. So we see here the issue of mestizaje, of race mixture. He actually puts in 4 main points. So the wars was the first point, the issue of mestizaje, the racial mixture, and how slowly populations are going to be less and less Black proportionally. And then the influx, the third point is the influx of European migrants into Argentina. It's going to be very important. And of course the abolition of the slave trade, which meant that less Black people would come. Not in Andrew's text, but otherwise we can consider that Argentina did not allow for Black immigrants. So there was no way of having new Black populations increase those populations that were there. So here we go to the point that he says that there's several shortcomings to this explanation provided traditionally for those 4 reasons for the African disappearance in the case of Argentina, particularly in Buenos Aires. So one of them is this issue of obscuring, of how they are there, but the historiography has not really wanted to see them. And that, I think, is one of the main issues that needs to be considered here. So the failure to examine this history of Afro-Spanish America since abolition is crucial. It's been an enormous obstacle in our efforts to understand the real experience of the Argentine. So that's what he tries to do in this book. This is already a classic book. It was the first book that Andrews published, and as you know, he has gone on to produce many very important studies. He is now concentrated in Uruguay, which is what the article is about, but now we're gonna be mainly looking at this. So how the Afro-Argentines disappeared. So this is chapter 5, and even by 1954, they represented 2.3% of the national population. So there was still quite a few around. One thing that Andrews pays a lot of attention is to censuses, and this is a topic that we have discussed all throughout the period, all throughout the module, which is how numbers really depend on who is recording the numbers, what kind of questions they're asking, who they're looking for, where they're looking. And Andrews has a lot to say about the presence of Afro-Argentines within these censuses. And he shows us a lot of numbers there, and also how the Black population was very skewed towards males. So how that also was a factor in their mixing, because they had to find other people to mix with. So then we see and also that had to do with the fact that women were more successful at whitening by marriage and by having children and by changing their social position. And so then we see this thing about immigration. So the alternative evidence is that the Black community did not disappear in the same extent as it has been measured. So they did disappear, but not to the numbers that it has been put forward. They appear, and this is something that is very interesting about what Andrews does, is he looks at where they actually are showing and appearing, like in the press, and having a sociability and having importance there, and different annual celebrations. So there's this whole thing about their participation in society that can be seen through newspapers, and that's data. This is the case of Bernardino Rivadavia, who was actually Afro-descendant, but nobody talked about it. So that's the thing that Andrews is focusing, this idea of obscuring by not showing the realities of someone's actual racial heritage. Now, trigueño, and we talked about this in some of the sessions last week about what it meant to be called trigueño and how that thing about coloring. If you watched already the documentary, you will see that in the Mexican case, this is analogous to be called moreno. So moreno, trigueño, these are different ways in which you can diffuse what is the actual blackness of someone. So neither black or white, so someone weak colored, someone who's mixed. And he kind of goes to explore that in more detail. So he provides a lot of numbers. So how they disappeared is one question, but the other question is why they disappeared. So the demographic decline was artificially accelerated by a deceptive use of statistics. I think that this is a key point because it kind of highlights this idea, and this is the same thing in both Mexico and in Peru. It's not that they have declined in such a large number, but that they haven't really been counted or considered to be part of society. And if anything you need to take away from this reading is that they have been officially obscured out of the record. So he kind of goes into that and looks at the 19th century and how that is all happening then. And the whitening. Now this is another important process. How does whitening occur? And it occurs, of course, by the importation of more white people and then the mixing with the blacks. So another thing that is important is the way in which Argentina has built itself on this notion of whiteness and how it has considered that to be its biggest asset. That is also something that needs to be considered. So yeah, this is pretty much what I wanted to discuss with you on Andrews. And now when you look at the video, I want you to especially concentrate on the issues of music and culture and how those have been very important for the for maintaining these notions of blackness in countries, particularly Mexico and Peru. So Gates is very fixated by music and how this allows for an understanding of a very long tradition. Another thing that Gates focuses on, and this is something that we have also talked about during sessions, has been on the difference between the United States, where you have one black drop and you're black, whereas in Latin America that has been less the case. And in many occasions it's been more that if you have a drop of white blood, you can call yourself less black. And there has been a desire to achieve that. So finally, just as a conclusion, I would like you to think about these issues and how these relate to the wider topic that we have discussed in this module, which is the legacy of inequality. We explored in quite a bit of detail in terms of how slavery lived on, and it had very long it had a very long afterlife in terms of the difference between those who have and those who have not. And here, when we think about the disappearance, it's important to note how this is also an issue that has a very long impact, particularly in countries like Argentina, Mexico, and Peru, where Black populations have been obscured. So I await your engagements in the forum, and I will be responding to those throughout the week. And I also would welcome any short videos that you'd like to post on any of these issues, or any comments or questions that you might want to include, or send me via message. For next week, as I mentioned before, I will be scheduling a one-to-one Skype meeting with each of you so that we can talk about your midterm essay and we can talk about preparing for your next essay. So thank you very much. I'm sorry that we can't meet in person this term, but I look forward to doing so in the near future. Take care.